Explore Poirot's Casebook Audio, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot cracks cases in immersive audio stories. In the shadowed halls of Blackthorn Manor, a scream shatters the elegance of a starlit evening. A wealthy patriarch lies dead, poisoned, betrayed, his secrets clawing at the surface. Who among the polished guests wove this deadly web? The scorned heiress? The charming rogue? Or the silent servant who sees all? As whispers of greed and vengeance tangle, only one man can unravel the truth: Hercule Poirot, the master of the little gray cells. Will his piercing logic expose the killer before another strike? Step into a labyrinth of lies where every clue hides a twist. Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot, secrets and surprising twists. A mystery that will grip you until the final revelation. Chapter 1. The Whispers of Lernaean Hall. In the late summer of 1928, the rolling hills of Devonshire cradled Lernaean Hall, a sprawling Georgian estate that stood as a monument to both grandeur and secrecy. Its ivy-clad walls, punctuated by tall mullioned windows, gleamed under the golden afternoon sun. Yet an air of unease hung over the manicured lawns. The hall belonged to Sir Reginald Ashbourne, a retired diplomat whose wealth and influence had drawn a curious assortment of guests for a weekend retreat. To the casual observer, it was a gathering of privilege and refinement, but beneath the polished surface simmered a cauldron of rivalries, jealousies, and unspoken grudges. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion of Hercule Poirot, arrived at Lernaean Hall at precisely 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, his suitcase in hand, and his heart buoyed by the prospect of a restful escape. Sir Reginald had extended the invitation through a mutual acquaintance, insisting that Hastings bring along that clever little Belgian detective, whose reputation for unraveling mysteries had reached even the insular circles of Devonshire society. Poirot, however, had declined to join immediately, citing a prior engagement in London. "Mon ami," he had said, his eyes twinkling with that familiar mix of mischief and calculation. "I shall arrive when the moment is ripe. Observe, Hastings, and tell me all that you see." The gravel drive crunched under Hastings' polished shoes as he approached the grand entrance. The butler, a stoic figure named Grayson, greeted him with a bow and led him into the oak-paneled hall, where the air was thick with the scent of beeswax and old money. The guests, already assembled, were sipping tea in the drawing room, their voices a low hum of polite conversation. Hastings scanned the room, his military instincts cataloging the players in this elegant drama. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, the host, was a tall man in his late 60s, stiffly by the fireplace, her lips pursed as though guarding a secret. Beside her, Dr. Malcolm Haverford, the family physician, adjusted his spectacles with a distracted air, his fingers twitching as if unaccustomed to idleness. The other guests were no less intriguing. Mrs. Beatrice Langston, a widowed novelist with a penchant for dramatic gestures, held court with tales of her latest book, her laughter a touch too loud. Her nephew Leonard Bryce, a handsome but sullen young man, lounged in a corner, his eyes fixed on Clara with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Major Ernest Whitlock, a retired army officer with a ruddy complexion, swapped anecdotes with Sir Reginald, though his joviality seemed forced. Finally, there was Miss Penelope Vane, a quiet governess, employed to tutor Clara's younger brother, who was absent at boarding school. Her demure demeanor and downcast eyes suggested she was more observer than participant in the gathering. As Hastings accepted a cup of tea from Lady Evelyn, he noted the undercurrents of tension. Clara's refusal to meet her stepmother's gaze, Leonard's brooding silence, and the way Mrs. Langston's stories seemed to needle Sir Reginald, all hinted at deeper fissures. The conversation turned to the Lernaean Hydra, a mythical beast from Greek lore that Sir Reginald had adopted as a motif for the estate, its 9-headed image carved into the fireplace mantel. "A fitting symbol, don't you think?" Sir Reginald mused, his voice rich with irony. "Cut off one head, and 2 more grow back. Secrets, my friends, are much the same." The afternoon wore on, and Hastings found himself seated next to Clara at dinner. The dining room, aglow with candlelight, was a masterpiece of opulence, its long mahogany table laden with crystal and silver. Yet the mood was anything but festive. Clara spoke little, her responses clipped, though she confided to Hastings that she found the weekend insufferable. When pressed, she glanced at her stepmother and muttered, "Some people think they can rewrite history with a smile." Hastings, ever the gentleman, did not pry further. But he filed the comment away for Poirot's inevitable dissection. As the clock struck 10, the guests retired to the drawing room for brandy and cards. Hastings, never one for gambling, excused himself to stroll the grounds, hoping the cool night air might clear his mind. The estate was eerily silent, save for the distant hoot of an owl and the rustle of leaves. He paused by a marble fountain, its waters glinting under the moon, and reflected on Poirot's absence. "What would you make?" stammered. He's dead." Hastings pushed through the crowd and ascended the stairs 2 at a time. In the master bedroom, Sir Reginald lay sprawled across the floor, a letter opener protruding from his chest. Blood stained the Persian rug, and a single sheet of paper, crumpled in his hand, bore the words, "The Hydra grows." The room was otherwise undisturbed, the window locked, the door unforced. Lady Evelyn, who had been the first to find him, stood frozen in the doorway, her hands pressed to her mouth. Hastings knelt beside the body, his mind racing. The wound was precise, the letter opener driven deep with force. He noted the time, 10:17 p.m., and the position of the body, angled toward the desk as if Sir Reginald had been writing when attacked. The paper in his hand was torn from a larger sheet, its edges uneven. Hastings pocketed it carefully, knowing Poirot would demand every detail. The guests, now assembled in the bedroom, erupted into chaos. Lady Evelyn sobbed, Clara stared in stunned silence, and Mrs. Langston declared it a plot straight from one of my novels. Major Whitlock called for the police, while Dr. Haverford examined the body, pronouncing death instantaneous. Leonard Bryce, his face ashen, muttered something about cursed families, and Miss Vane shrank into the shadows, her eyes wide with fear. Hastings took charge, urging everyone to return to the drawing room. As he secured the scene, he couldn't shake the feeling that the murderer was among them, their motives as tangled as the Hydra's heads. He sent a telegram to Poirot, urging his immediate arrival, and stood guard over the body, the weight of the mystery pressing upon him. The night deepened, and Lernaean Hall seemed to close in, its walls whispering secrets that only Hercule Poirot could unravel. Hastings glanced at the crumpled note in his hand, its cryptic message a challenge to the little gray cells he so admired. "The Hydra grows," he whispered, and a chill ran down his spine. Chapter 2. The Shadow of the Hydra. The drawing room of Lernaean Hall, bathed in the flickering glow of a chandelier, was a tableau of strained faces and stifled whispers as the clock ticked past midnight. The guests, confined by Captain Hastings's firm instruction, sat in uneasy silence, their eyes darting between one another as if each suspected their neighbor of the gruesome act upstairs. Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder had shattered the veneer of civility, and the air was thick with suspicion. Hastings stood by the fireplace, his military bearing a steady anchor amid the chaos, though his mind churned with questions. The crumpled note, "The Hydra grows," lay heavy in his pocket, tightly in her lap, her expression unreadable. Dr. Malcolm Haverford, the family physician, paced near the window, muttering about the need for a proper autopsy, while Major Ernest Whitlock, his ruddy cheeks flushed with agitation, demanded to know why the police had not yet arrived. Mrs. Beatrice Langston, the novelist, scribbled furiously in a notebook, her eyes gleaming with a mix of horror and fascination, as if the murder were raw material for her next bestseller. Her nephew, Leonard Bryce, slouched in an armchair, his gaze fixed on the floor, while Miss Penelope Vane, the governess, hovered near the door, her slight frame trembling. Hastings, ever observant, noted the small details, the way Lady Evelyn's fingers twitched when Clara glanced at her, the faint tremor in Dr. Haverford's voice, and the curious absence of Leonard's usual arrogance. He longed for Poirot's presence, knowing the Belgian detective's sharp mind would already be piecing together the puzzle. As if summoned by the thought, the door swung open, and Grayson, the butler, announced, "The police have arrived, sir, and—" "A gentleman named Monsieur Hercule Poirot." A murmur rippled through the room as Poirot stepped inside, his diminutive figure immaculate in a tailored suit, his mustache waxed to perfection. His green eyes, bright and piercing, swept over the assembled company, taking in every detail with the precision of a watchmaker. Hastings felt a surge of relief, tempered by curiosity at Poirot's uncanny timing. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice calm yet commanding. "You have called, and Poirot, he answers. Now tell me, what is this tragedy that disturbs the peace of Lernaean Hall?" Hastings recounted the events. Sir Reginald's body, the letter opener, the cryptic note, and the locked room. Poirot listened intently, his head tilted slightly, his fingers steepled before him. When Hastings finished, Poirot nodded and addressed the room. "Mesdames et messieurs, a crime has been committed, and it is one of calculation, not passion. The murderer is among us, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall uncover the truth. But first I must see the scene." Accompanied by Hastings and Inspector Japp, a gruff but competent policeman who had arrived with the local constabulary, Poirot ascended to the master bedroom. The room was as Hastings had left it. Sir Reginald's body lay on the rug, the letter opener gleaming cruelly in the lamplight. Poirot moved with deliberate care, his eyes scanning the desk, the carpet, the locked window. "Multiply. This note, it is not a confession, but a taunt." He slipped it into an envelope, handing it to Japp for safekeeping. Poirot's attention turned to the desk, where a half-finished letter lay beside an inkwell. The letter, addressed to a solicitor, mentioned amendments to my will, and was dated that very evening, 10 p.m. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The time, it is significant." Sir Reginald was writing when he was interrupted. But by whom? And why? Inspector Japp, scratching his chin, suggested, Could be a robbery gone wrong. Valuable estate like this, plenty of treasures to tempt a thief. Poirot shook his head. No, Inspector. The room is untouched, the window locked, the door unforced. This is no thief's work. This is personal. Returning to the drawing room, Poirot began his interviews, his manner polite yet relentless. He started with Lady Evelyn, whose composure faltered under his scrutiny. Sir Reginald was in good spirits, she insisted, her voice trembling. We dined, we played cards, and he retired early, saying he had correspondence to attend to. Poirot nodded, noting the exact time she claimed to have last seen her husband, 9:45 p.m. Clara, questioned next, was curt. I was in my room reading, she said, her eyes avoiding Poirot's. I heard nothing until the scream. When pressed about her relationship with her father, she admitted, we had our disagreements, but I loved him. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Love, mademoiselle, is a complex thing. It can inspire both devotion and betrayal. Dr. Haverford claimed to have been in the library, reviewing medical journals, while Major Whitlock said he was smoking a cigar on the terrace. Mrs. Langston, ever theatrical, recounted a heated discussion with Sir Reginald about her latest manuscript, which he had called sensationalist nonsense. Leonard Bryce admitted to wandering the grounds, clearing his head, and Miss Vane, barely audible, said she was in her room preparing lessons. Poirot listened, his expression unreadable, but Hastings knew the wheels were turning. Notice, Hastings, Poirot whispered as they stepped aside. The alibis, they are vague yet precise in their timing. Each claims to be alone, yet no one can confirm another's story. This is no coincidence. As the night wore on, Japp's men searched the house, finding no signs of forced entry or missing valuables. Poirot, however, lingered by the fireplace, studying the carved hydra. This symbol, he said, it is central. Sir Reginald chose it for a reason. Perhaps he knew motive. Money, power, betrayal. And the room, locked as it is, tells me the murderer is clever but not invisible. We must look to the little details, the contradictions. As dawn approached, Poirot announced that the guests must remain at Lernaean Hall until the investigation concluded. A collective groan arose, but none dared defy the diminutive detective. He retired to a guest room, promising to resume his inquiries in the morning. Hastings, settling into his own quarters, couldn't shake the image of the Hydra's carved heads, their stone eyes seeming to watch him. The note's words echoed in his mind. The Hydra grows. Whatever secrets Sir Reginald had guarded, they were now loose, and only Poirot's little gray cells could sever their heads. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Order. The first light of dawn crept through the heavy drapes of Lernaean Hall, casting long shadows across the drawing room where Captain Hastings sat, nursing a cup of tepid tea. The events of the previous night had left the guests restless, their nerves frayed by the murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne and the unsettling presence of Hercule Poirot, whose calm demeanor seemed to amplify their unease. Hastings had barely slept, his mind replaying the grim scene in the master bedroom, the letter opener, the crumpled note, and the locked room that defied explanation. He longed for Poirot's clarity, for the Belgian's ability to impose order on chaos. At precisely 7 o'clock, Poirot descended the grand staircase, his appearance as immaculate as ever. His black patent shoes gleamed. His mustache was a work of art, and his green eyes sparkled with purpose. Bonjour, mon ami, he greeted Hastings, his voice bright despite the grim circumstances. The night, it has been long. but the day it brings opportunity. We shall unravel this mystery, but first we must observe the players in their natural state. The guests, summoned by Grayson, gathered in the dining room for breakfast, though few had an appetite. The long table, now stripped of its previous night's opulence, held only a modest spread of toast, marmalade, and coffee. Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, her eyes red-rimmed, picked at a slice of bread, while Clara Ashbourne sat opposite, her posture rigid, her gaze fixed on a point beyond the room. Dr. Malcolm Haverford sipped his coffee with trembling hands, his spectacles slipping down his nose. Major Ernest Whitlock, attempting to maintain decorum, made small talk about the weather, but his voice lacked conviction. Mrs. Beatrice Langston, ever the dramatist, recounted a nightmare she claimed to have had, her words drawing irritated glances from Leonard Bryce, who slouched beside her. Miss Penelope Vane, the governess, gaze, the nervous twitch in Leonard's jaw, the way Miss Vane's fingers tightened around her napkin when Dr. Haverford spoke. Hastings, seated beside him, whispered, "They're all on edge, Poirot. Do you think the murderer is here, watching us?" "Mais oui, Hastings," Poirot replied softly, his eyes never leaving the group. "The murderer is always watching, always calculating. But they cannot hide from Poirot. The truth, it reveals itself in the smallest gestures, the slightest contradictions." Inspector Japp, who had spent the night coordinating with the local police, joined them mid-morning, his face etched with fatigue. "We've searched the grounds," he reported, addressing Poirot. "No signs of an intruder. The servants confirm the doors were locked, and the windows in Sir Reginald's room show no tampering. Whoever did this knew the house well." Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And the letter opener, Inspector? Have you traced its origin?" "It's one of a set from the library," Japp replied. "Kept on a writing desk, accessible to anyone. No fingerprints, though, wiped clean. Naturellement," Poirot murmured. "The murderer is cautious but not infallible. The absence of fingerprints, it is itself a clue." After breakfast, Poirot requested a tour of the house, insisting that Hastings and Japp accompany him. Grayson led them through the labyrinthine corridors of Lernaean Hall, its walls lined with portraits of Ashbourne ancestors, their stern faces seeming to judge the living. Poirot paused frequently, examining details that seemed trivial to Hastings: the alignment of a rug, the dust on a windowsill, the angle of a chair in the library. In the master bedroom, he lingered by the desk, studying the half-finished letter to the solicitor. "This will," he said. "It is the key." Sir Reginald intended to change it, but why? And who stood to lose? They moved to the library, where the letter opener's twin gleamed on a mahogany desk. Poirot picked it up, testing its weight. A weapon of opportunity, he mused, but chosen with care. It is elegant, like the crime itself. He noted the room's layout: a single door, 2 windows overlooking the garden, and a fireplace with the Hydra motif carved above it. "This room," he said, "it is a stage. The murderer passed through here, perhaps to retrieve the weapon, perhaps to leave a message." As they returned to the drawing room, Poirot began his interrogations in earnest, calling each guest individually to a small parlor. He started with Grayson. Scrutiny. He admitted to a financial dispute with Sir Reginald, who had refused to invest in a speculative venture. "The old man was stubborn," Whitlock grumbled. "Said my plan was foolhardy. but I didn't kill him for it. Mrs. Langston, ever theatrical, spun a tale of literary rivalry, claiming Sir Reginald had threatened to sue her over a thinly veiled caricature of him in her latest novel. He was furious, she said, her eyes wide with drama. But I'm no murderer, Monsieur Poirot. I kill only on the page, Leonard Bryce, when pressed, revealed a simmering resentment towards Sir Reginald, who had opposed his courtship of Clara. He called me a fortune hunter, Leonard spat, his fists clenched. Said I wasn't good enough for his daughter. Miss Vane, the governess, was the most reticent, her voice barely above a whisper. She claimed to have seen nothing unusual, but Poirot noted the way her hands trembled when he mentioned the letter opener. "You are nervous, mademoiselle," he said gently. "Is there something you wish to share?" She shook her head, her eyes darting to the door. By midday, Poirot had gathered a wealth of information, though he shared little with Hastings or Japp. "The alibis," he said, "they are like a tapestry, beautifully woven, but with threads that do not align. We must pull at them, Hastings, until the pattern emerges." As the afternoon wore on, a new discovery shook the house. One of Japp's men found a small vial in the garden, half buried near the fountain where Hastings had stood the previous night. It contained traces of a colorless liquid, which Dr. Haverford identified as a sedative. Could have been used to drug Sir Reginald, Japp speculated. Make him easier to kill. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Or to create an alibi, he said. The timing, it is everything. We must reconstruct the evening, minute by minute. He gathered the guests in the drawing room, his presence commanding silence. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "a crime has been committed, and each of you holds a piece of the truth. I ask you now to recall your movements between 9 and 10 o'clock last night. Be precise, for the truth lies in the details." The responses were hesitant, contradictory. Lady Evelyn claimed to have been in the drawing room, but Clara said she saw her stepmother in the hall at 9:50. Dr. Haverford's library alibi was questioned by Miss Vane, who admitted to passing the library door and hearing voices. Leonard's claim of wandering the grounds was unsupported, and Major Whitlock's "Poirot? There's so much to untangle." Poirot smiled faintly. "Now, mon ami, we watch. The murderer will make a mistake, and when they do, the little gray cells will be ready." The day closed with Lernaean Hall shrouded in mist, its secrets as elusive as the Hydra's heads. Hastings felt the weight of the mystery, but with Poirot at his side, he knew the truth was within reach. Chapter 4. The Threads of Suspicion. The morning sun struggled to pierce the heavy mist enveloping Lernaean Hall, casting a pall over the estate that mirrored the tension within its walls. By mid-morning, the dining room had become a makeshift headquarters for Hercule Poirot's investigation, its long table cluttered with notes, a floor plan of the house, and a timeline of the fatal evening. Captain Hastings, ever the dutiful aide, stood by Poirot's side, marveling at the detective's ability to transform chaos into order. The guests, confined to the house by Inspector Japp's orders, moved like specters, their faces etched with anxiety and suspicion. The murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne had stripped away their masks, revealing a web of motives that Poirot was determined to untangle. Poirot, seated at the head of the table, reviewed his notes with meticulous care, his fountain pen tapping rhythmically against the paper. "The little gray cells, Hastings," he said, his voice low but resonant. "They are at work. Each person in this house has a story, but not all stories are true. We must find the contradictions, the threads that do not weave into the tapestry." Hastings nodded, though he felt overwhelmed by the complexity of the case. The locked room, the cryptic note, the sedative vial, and the half-finished letter about a will. It was a puzzle with too many pieces. "Where do we begin, Poirot?" he asked. "Everyone seems to have a motive, but no one has a clear opportunity." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Opportunity, mon ami, is not always what it seems. The locked room, it is not a barrier, but a clue. The murderer planned this crime with precision, but precision leaves traces. We shall begin with the interviews, formal, methodical, and relentless." The parlor, with its high ceilings and velvet drapes, became Poirot's interrogation chamber. He summoned the guests one by one, his demeanor polite but unyielding, his questions sharp as a scalpel. Hastings sat in a corner taking notes while Inspector Japp leaned against the wall, his skepticism tempered by grudging respect for Poirot's methods. First was Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, whose fragile composure wavered under Poirot's scrutiny. She wore a black silk dress, her mourning attire a stark contrast to her pale. "Seen you in the hall at 9:50, near the staircase. How do you explain this?" Lady Evelyn's lips parted, but no sound came. After a moment, she stammered. "Clara must be mistaken. I was in my room." Poirot smiled faintly, a smile that promised further inquiry, and dismissed her. Clara Ashbourne was next, her sharp features set in defiance. She confirmed her earlier statement. She had been reading in her room until the scream at 10:17 p.m., but admitted to passing the hall earlier, where she saw Lady Evelyn. She was pacing, looking agitated, Clara said, her voice cold. "I didn't think much of it then, but now." Poirot pressed her about her argument with her father, which Grayson had overheard. Clara's eyes flashed. It was about the estate. He wanted to sell part of it to fund Evelyn's extravagances. I told him it was madness. Dr. Malcolm Haverford, fidgeting with his spectacles, claimed to have been in the library from 9 to 10 p.m., reviewing medical journals. "I heard nothing unusual," he said, though his voice quavered. Poirot noted the sedative vial found in the garden and asked if Haverford had prescribed anything to Sir Reginald. "No," the doctor replied quickly. "He was in excellent health, though. He did mention feeling tired lately." Poirot's eyebrows rose, but he said nothing. Major Ernest Whitlock, his bluster subdued, reiterated his terrace alibi, claiming he smoked a cigar from 9:30 to 10 p.m. "The servants must have missed me," he said, when Poirot pointed out their lack of corroboration. It was dark. Poirot asked about his financial dispute with Sir Reginald. Whitlock's face reddened. "He refused to back my venture, yes, but I'm no killer." I respected the man. Mrs. Beatrice Langston swept into the parlor with theatrical flair, her notebook clutched like a shield. She admitted to her argument with Sir Reginald about her novel, but insisted it was a trivial matter. Poirot probed further, asking about her financial situation. "You are a successful novelist, madame, yet Sir Reginald mentioned debts in his letter to the solicitor. Were you seeking his aid?" Mrs. Langston laughed, a brittle sound. "My debts are my own affair, Monsieur Poirot. I had no need to harm him." Leonard Bryce, sullen and defensive, confirmed his wandering on the grounds but offered no witnesses. "I needed air," he said. "This house suffocates me." When Poirot asked about his feelings for Clara, Leonard's jaw tightened. Sir Reginald thought I was after her money. He was wrong, but he wouldn't listen. Miss Penelope Vane, the governess, was the last, her voice barely audible. Piercing. You see much, mademoiselle, yet you say little. Why is this? She flushed and looked away. After the interviews, Poirot retreated to the library, where he examined the letter opener's twin and the Hydra carving above the fireplace. This room, he said to Hastings, it is the heart of the crime. The weapon came from here, and perhaps the motive as well. He ran his fingers along the desk, pausing at a faint scratch mark near the edge. Curieux, he murmured. This mark, it is recent. Something was moved or dropped. Japp, growing impatient, pressed Poirot for a theory. It's a locked room, Poirot. No one could have gotten in or out without being seen. Are we dealing with a ghost? Poirot chuckled. No, Inspector. The room is locked, but the mind of the murderer is not. They have left clues, small but significant. The vial, the letter, the scratch. They tell a story. Poirot then requested a detailed timeline from Grayson, who provided the servants' movements. The butler confirmed that the house was locked by 9 p.m., with no unauthorized entries. The footman, a young man named Thomas, reported seeing Leonard Bryce near the fountain at 9:40 p.m., contradicting Leonard's claim of aimless wandering. Poirot's eyes lit up. A discrepancy, Hastings. The first of many. As the day progressed, Poirot gathered the guests in the drawing room to review their alibis collectively, a tactic Hastings recognized as designed to provoke. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, your stories, they do not align. Times conflict, movements overlap. Someone is lying, and I shall find them. Let us consider the vial of sedative. Who among you has knowledge of such substances? His gaze lingered on Dr. Haverford, who flushed, and Lady Evelyn, who looked away. The room grew tense, with Clara accusing Lady Evelyn of manipulating her father, and Leonard snapping at Major Whitlock for questioning his character. Mrs. Langston, ever the observer, scribbled notes, while Miss Vane shrank further into herself. Poirot watched, his silence more unnerving than his questions. As evening fell, Poirot confided to Hastings, "The Hydra, it grows indeed. Each lie spawns another, but we are close to severing a head. Tomorrow, we shall test their stories further." Hastings, weary but intrigued, felt the weight of the mystery deepen. Lernaean Hall, with its secrets and shadows, seemed to pulse with menace. And only Poirot's methodical mind could. He were both predator and savior. Hastings, his notebook filled with conflicting alibis and cryptic clues, felt the weight of the mystery pressing harder. Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder, with its locked room and taunting note, "The Hydra grows," had cast a net of suspicion over all, and Poirot was tightening the strands. Poirot, immaculate in a charcoal suit, sipped his coffee with deliberate calm, his green eyes scanning the room. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, "today we shall stir the waters. The murderer. They believe they have outwitted us, but they have left too many footprints. We must follow the false ones, the red herrings, to find the true path." Hastings frowned, puzzled. "Red herrings, Poirot? You think someone is deliberately misleading us?" "Mais oui," Poirot replied, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. In every great crime there is a distraction, a lie so bold it blinds the unwary. But Poirot, he is not unwary. Let us see who points the finger most loudly. The morning began with a startling development. Inspector Japp, red-eyed from a night of coordinating with the local police, announced that a second letter opener, identical to the murder weapon, had been found hidden behind a bookcase in the library. It was smeared with blood, though whether it was Sir Reginald's was yet to be confirmed. The discovery sent a ripple of panic through the guests, who gathered in the drawing room at Poirot's request. "This," Japp declared, holding the weapon aloft in a gloved hand, "suggests someone tried to dispose of evidence. Any takers?" The accusation hung in the air, and predictably, fingers began to point. Major Ernest Whitlock, his face flushed, suggested Leonard Bryce, whose wanderings on the grounds made him a convenient suspect. "The boy was skulking about," Whitlock said. "I saw him near the library window that night. Up to no good. I'd wager Leonard," his temper flaring, shot back. "You're one to talk, Major. You were desperate for father's money. Everyone heard you arguing with him." Lady Evelyn, her voice trembling, suggested the servants might have had access to the library, casting a nervous glance at Grayson, who stood impassively by the door. Clara, her eyes cold, countered that Lady Evelyn herself had been seen near the staircase, contradicting her alibi. Mrs. Beatrice Langston, ever eager for drama, proposed a conspiracy, hinting that Dr. Malcolm Haverford's medical knowledge made him a likely candidate for planting the sedative vial. Haverford, indignant, sputtered, "I'm a doctor, not a poison opener. It is a distraction, a red herring. The real question is why it was hidden, and by whom." Poirot's interrogation resumed in the parlor, his questions now sharper, designed to provoke. He began with Leonard Bryce, whose sullen demeanor masked a nervous energy. "Monsieur Bryce," Poirot said, "you claim to have been wandering the grounds, yet Thomas the footman saw you near the fountain at 9:40. The library window overlooks the fountain. Did you enter the house?" Leonard's jaw tightened. "I didn't go inside," he insisted. "I was thinking about Clara. Sir Reginald's threats upset me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Threats, monsieur? What did Sir Reginald say precisely?" Leonard hesitated, then admitted. "He said he'd cut Clara out of his will if she married me. Called me a parasite." The admission hung heavy, and Hastings jotted it down, sensing a motive as clear as day. Next, Poirot questioned Major Whitlock, whose bluster faltered under scrutiny. "You were on the terrace, monsieur, smoking a cigar," Poirot said. "Yet no servant saw you, and the terrace is visible from the servants' quarters. Where were you truly at 9:50? Whitlock blustered. "I was there, I tell you. Perhaps I stepped into the shadows." Poirot's smile was thin. "Shadows, Major, are convenient for many things." Mrs. Langston, when called, spun a tale of literary ambition, claiming the hidden letter opener was a plot twist worthy of my novels. Poirot was unimpressed. "Madame, your debts are no secret. Did Sir Reginald's refusal to help you drive you to desperation?" She laughed, but it was strained. "I write about murder, Monsieur Poirot, not commit it. Dr. Haverford, visibly shaken, admitted to prescribing sedatives for Lady Evelyn's nerves, but denied any connection to the vial in the garden. "I keep my medicines locked away," he said. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And yet, doctor, a vial appears, conveniently placed. Who had access to your bag?" Haverford paled, unable to answer. Clara Ashbourne, her composure fraying, revealed more about her argument with her father. "He was going to sell the East Wing," she said, her voice bitter. "It's been in our family for generations. Evelyn pushed him into it. I know she did." Poirot noted the intensity of her anger, filing it away. Lady Evelyn questioned suspicion. He cross-referenced the timeline, noting that the library was empty between 9:30 and 10 p.m. according to the servants. "Someone," he said to Hastings, "used this time to plant the weapon. But why not dispose of it entirely? It is a risk, unless the risk was the point." Jap, growing frustrated, pressed Poirot for a theory. "This second letter opener muddies everything," he said. "Is it the real murder weapon?" Poirot shook his head. "No, Inspector. The first was the weapon, wiped clean. The second is a decoy, meant to confuse. The murderer wishes us to chase shadows." As evening approached, Poirot gathered the guests again, his presence commanding. "The Hydra," he said. "It thrives on deception. Each of you points to another, but the truth lies in what you do not say. The letter opener, the vial, the will. They are pieces of a pattern. I urge you, speak now, or the net tightens." The room fell silent, but Hastings saw fear in their eyes. Fear of Poirot's relentless logic. Later in private, Hastings asked, "Do you suspect someone, Poirot?" The detective's smile was enigmatic. "I suspect everyone, mon ami, until the little gray cells say otherwise. The red herrings, they are plentiful, but the truth is near. We must watch for the next mistake." As night fell, Lernaean Hall seemed to hold its breath, its secrets coiling tighter, waiting for Poirot to strike. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The third morning at Lernaean Hall broke with a fragile stillness, the mist outside thinning to reveal the estate's sprawling lawns, now sodden from an overnight drizzle. Inside, the air was heavy with unspoken accusations, the guests moving through the house like actors in a play they no longer understood. Captain Hastings, nursing a headache from sleepless nights, sat in the dining room, his notebook open to a page crowded with timelines, alibis, and Poirot's cryptic annotations. The murder of Sir Reginald Ashburn, with its locked room, cryptic note, and planted letter opener, had woven a web so intricate that Hastings felt lost in its threads. Yet Hercule Poirot, seated opposite with a cup of tisane, radiated calm, his green eyes alight with the thrill of the chase. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low but vibrant. "Today we shall find the detail that unlocks the mystery. The little gray cells, they have been busy, and they tell me that the truth lies not in the grand gestures, but in the small, the overlooked. We must look closely, Hastings, for the clue that does not fit." Hastings, ever eager for clarity, the master bedroom, where Sir Reginald's body had been found. Inspector Japp, now joined by a forensic expert from Exeter, had confirmed that the blood on the second letter opener matched Sir Reginald's. But its placement behind the library bookcase suggested a deliberate attempt to mislead. Poirot, undeterred by this red herring, focused on the desk where the half-finished letter to the solicitor lay. He examined the inkwell, noting its lid was slightly askew, and the pen, which bore a faint smear of ink on its nib, as if it had been set down in haste. "Curieux," Poirot murmured, holding the pen to the light. "This smear. It is not from Sir Reginald's hand. The letter is written in black ink, but this smear is blue. Someone else used this pen, perhaps in this very room." Hastings, puzzled, asked, "But who? And why?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "That, mon ami, is the question." The desk. It tells a story of interruption, of a second presence. Poirot's attention shifted to the crumpled note, "The Hydra grows," which he retrieved from Japp's evidence bag. He smoothed it out, studying the handwriting. "The script," he said. "It is hurried, but deliberate. It matches the letter to the solicitor, yet there is a difference in pressure, as if written under duress, or perhaps by another hand." He paused, his fingers tracing the torn edge. "This paper, it is not whole. A piece is missing, torn away. We must find it." The search for the missing fragment led Poirot to the library, where the Hydra carving loomed above the fireplace. He examined the bookcase where the second letter opener had been found, running his fingers along the shelves. Near the bottom, caught in a crack, was a tiny scrap of paper, no larger than a postage stamp. Poirot extracted it with tweezers, revealing a single word in the same hurried script. "Beware." He held it up, his expression triumphant. "Voila, Hastings. The missing piece." The note was longer but torn to obscure its meaning. "The Hydra grows. Beware." A warning or a threat? Hastings felt a chill. A warning to Sir Reginald? Or from him? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "That we shall discover. But this scrap, it was not meant to be found. The murderer is clever, but not omniscient." Poirot's next move was to re-interview the guests, focusing on their interactions with Sir Reginald on the night of the murder. He began with Clara Ashbourne, whose icy composure had begun to crack. In the parlor she sat stiffly, her hands clenched. "You argued with your—" "Write a letter. It had blue ink, but I returned it." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "And where did you write this letter, mademoiselle?" Clara flushed. "In the library. But I didn't go near his room that night." Dr. Malcolm Haverford, questioned next, grew agitated when Poirot mentioned the sedative vial. "I told you, I keep my medicines locked," he said. "Someone must have taken it." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "And yet, doctor, you were in the library, near the letter opener, at a time when others heard voices. What were you discussing?" Haverford stammered, I was alone, reading." The voices must have been from the hall. Lady Evelyn, her morning attire now disheveled, claimed ignorance of the blue ink, but admitted to writing a note to her dressmaker that morning, using a pen from the drawing room. It was black ink, she insisted, though her eyes darted nervously. Poirot noted the contradiction but moved on, asking about her husband's mention of the Hydra. "He was fond of the myth," she said. "He said it reminded him of his enemies, always multiplying." Major Whitlock, Mrs. Langston, Leonard Bryce, and Miss Vane offered little new, though Poirot noted their increasing unease. Miss Vane, in particular, seemed on the verge of speaking, but held back, her eyes fixed on the floor. "You see much, mademoiselle," Poirot said gently. If you know something, it is better to speak now. She shook her head, trembling. As noon approached, Poirot gathered the guests in the drawing room, holding the scrap of paper aloft. "This," he said, "is a piece of the truth. Beware," it says, torn from the note in Sir Reginald's hand. Someone wished to hide its meaning, but they have failed. The Hydra grows, and so does the danger. Who among you wrote this warning? The room fell silent, but Hastings saw fear in their eyes, particularly in Leonard's and Miss Vane's. After the meeting, Poirot confided to Hastings, "The blue ink, the torn note, the sedative, they are threads in a pattern. The murderer used the library, the desk, the myth of the Hydra to obscure their actions. But the detail, it betrays them. We are close, mon ami Hastings." Though still puzzled, felt a surge of anticipation. The clue, small as it was, had shifted the investigation, and Poirot's relentless logic was closing in. As the afternoon waned, a servant reported a new discovery. A blue-stained handkerchief. The discovery of the blue-stained handkerchief, found among Clara Ashbourne's linens, had sent a fresh wave of suspicion through the guests, who now eyed one another with barely concealed hostility. Captain Hastings, seated in the dining room with his notebook, felt the mystery deepening, its threads tangling further with each revelation. The murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne, with its locked room, cryptic note, and planted clues, seemed to defy logic, yet Hercule Poirot, sipping his tisane with infuriating calm, appeared more confident than ever. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a quiet melody amid the tension. "The handkerchief, it is a significant detail, but not the whole story. Lies are piling upon lies, like the heads of the Hydra. We must cut through them, Hastings, to find the heart of the crime." Hastings, his mind racing, gestured to his notes. "The blue ink on the handkerchief matches the smear on the pen, Poirot. Clara admitted to using it that morning, but could she really be the murderer? She seemed so devoted to her father despite their arguments." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Devotion, Hastings, can be a mask for darker motives, but we must not rush to judgment. The handkerchief, it may be a plant, another red herring to divert us. Let us probe deeper, into the secrets that fester beneath the surface." The investigation took a new turn as Poirot summoned the guest to the drawing room, his presence commanding instant silence. He held the handkerchief aloft, its blue stain stark against the white linen. "This," he declared, "was found among Mademoiselle Clara's possessions. It bears the ink of the pen in Sir Reginald's room. Who can explain this?" His gaze swept the room, lingering on Clara, whose face paled, her hands clenching the arms of her chair. I don't know how it got there," Clara stammered, her voice sharp with panic. "I used the pen, yes, but I never took a handkerchief to Father's room." Her eyes darted to Lady Evelyn, who sat frozen, her lips pressed into a thin line. Lady Evelyn, sensing the accusation, rose to her defense. "This is absurd," she cried. "Clara's trying to shift blame. I saw her arguing with Reginald that afternoon. She was furious about the will." The room erupted in murmurs, with Major Ernest Whitlock muttering about family greed, and Mrs. Beatrice Langston scribbling furiously in her notebook, her eyes gleaming with intrigue. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the chaos. "Accusations, they are plentiful, but evidence is what we seek. Let us explore the motives that lie hidden, the secrets that bind you all to this crime." He began a new route for her lavish lifestyle. I begged him to stop her, but he was blind to her manipulation. When Poirot asked about the handkerchief, Clara insisted it was not hers. "Someone must have taken it from my room," she said. "I keep my linens in a drawer by the window. Anyone could have accessed it." Lady Evelyn, her composure fraying, revealed a financial strain that Poirot had suspected. "Reginald was generous," she said, her voice tight. "But the estate's income wasn't what it seemed. He was planning to sell assets to cover debts. My debts, yes, but also his own. He spoke of changing the will to ensure Clara's security, but I didn't know the details." Poirot noted her evasiveness, asking, "And the sedative vial, madame?" "Dr. Haverford prescribed it for you. Could it have been used that night?" She shook her head vehemently. "I took my dose at 8 and slept until the scream woke me." Dr. Malcolm Haverford, increasingly nervous, admitted to a professional lapse. "Sir Reginald consulted me about his fatigue," he said, adjusting his spectacles. "I suspected stress, perhaps from financial worries or family disputes. I didn't prescribe anything, but someone could have taken the vial from my bag. It was in the library that afternoon." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And who was in the library with you, doctor?" Miss Vane heard voices. Haverford hesitated, then said, "I was speaking to Mrs. Langston about her novel. She asked for medical details for a plot." Mrs. Langston, ever theatrical, confirmed the conversation but added a twist. "Dr. Haverford seemed distracted," she said, her voice dripping with implication. "He kept glancing at the door as if expecting someone, and I saw Leonard lurking near the library earlier that day." Poirot pressed her about her debts, which she dismissed with a laugh. "A novelist's life is precarious, Monsieur Poirot, but I didn't need Reginald's money. My books sell well enough." Leonard Bryce, his sullen demeanor now tinged with desperation, admitted to a confrontation with Sir Reginald the day before the murder. "He threatened to ruin me," Leonard said, his fists clenched. "Said he'd spread word I was a fortune hunter, make sure no one in society would touch me. But I didn't kill him." When asked about the handkerchief, he claimed ignorance, though his eyes flickered toward Clara, betraying a mix of affection and fear. Miss Penelope Vane, the governess, was the most reticent, her voice barely audible. "I saw nothing, heard nothing," she insisted. But Poirot's gentle persistence drew out a confession. I overheard Sir Reginald and Clara arguing in the study that afternoon. He said something about cutting off the Hydra's heads. I thought it was about the estate, but it sounded so final." Poirot leaned. I think it was Lady Evelyn." The revelations piled up, each guest exposing a fracture in their relationships with Sir Reginald. Poirot, back in the library, examined the drawer where Clara kept her linens, noting its proximity to the hall. "Anyone could have taken the handkerchief," he said to Hastings. "But the ink, it links to the pen, and the pen to the note. The murderer is weaving a web, but it is fraying." Inspector Japp, growing impatient, reported a new find. A torn piece of fabric, caught on a rosebush near the fountain, matching the cuff of Leonard's jacket. "He was out there all right," Japp said, "and close to where the vial was found." Poirot nodded but cautioned, "Another sled, Inspector, but not the whole cloth. We must be careful not to be led astray." As evening fell, Poirot gathered the guests once more, his voice grave. "The Hydra grows, mesdames et messieurs, because you feed it with lies. Debts, betrayals, forbidden love, these are the heads of the beast. But I, Hercule Poirot, shall sever them. Speak the truth, or the truth will find you." The room was silent, but Hastings saw cracks in their facades, Clara's trembling hands, Lady Evelyn's averted gaze, Leonard's clenched jaw. In private, Hastings pressed Poirot. "Are we closer, Poirot?" "The handkerchief, the fabric, they point to Clara and Leonard. But it feels too neat." Poirot's smile was knowing. "The murderer wishes us to think it neat, Hastings. But the little gray cells, they see the pattern beneath. Tomorrow we shall tighten the net." Lernaean Hall, its shadows lengthening, seemed to pulse with secrets, but Poirot's relentless logic was a blade poised to strike. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The fourth day at Lernaean Hall dawned with a restless energy, the oppressive mist giving way to a brittle sunlight that illuminated the estate's ivy-clad walls, but did little to lift the gloom within. The guests, worn down by days of suspicion and Hercule Poirot's relentless probing, moved through the house. Chapter 9. The Trap. The fifth day at Lernaean Hall carried an electric charge, as if the very air anticipated a reckoning. The guests, worn down by Hercule Poirot's relentless probing and the weight of their own secrets, moved through the house with the caution of cornered animals. Captain Hastings, seated in the dining room with his notebook, felt the tension coiling tighter. The murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne, with its locked room, cryptic note, blue-stained handkerchief, and Miss Penelope Vane's tearful confession, had pushed the investigation to a precipice. Poirot, however, was in his element, his green eyes alight with the thrill of the hunt as he sipped his morning tisane. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low and deliberate, "today we set the trap. The murderer, they believe they have outwitted us, but the little gray cells, they see the pattern. We shall provoke, we shall observe, and the truth, it will emerge." Hastings, his mind racing with the latest revelations, leaned forward. "A trap, Poirot? You mean to flush out the killer by confronting them directly?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "Not directly, Hastings. The murderer is clever, but their nerves are frayed. We shall apply pressure, subtly, and watch for the mistake that betrays them." The morning began with Poirot's announcement to the guests gathered in the drawing room, under Inspector Japp's watchful eye. "Mesdames et messieurs," he declared, his voice commanding silence, "the hydra of this crime grows with your secrets, but today we shall sever a head. I know more than you think, and I shall reveal it tonight. Return here at 8 o'clock and be prepared to face the truth." His words, delivered with calm authority, sent a ripple of unease through the room. Lady Evelyn Ashbourne's hands trembled, Clara Ashbourne's eyes narrowed, and Leonard Bryce's jaw tightened. Mrs. Beatrice Langston scribbled furiously, while Dr. Malcolm Haverford adjusted his spectacles nervously. Miss Vane, pale and silent, avoided all gazes. Poirot spent the day in meticulous preparation, his movements deliberate as he revisited key locations: the master bedroom, the library, and the garden near the fountain. In the bedroom, he re-examined the desk, noting the position of the inkwell and the faint scratch mark he had observed earlier. "This scratch," he said to Hastings, "it was made by something sharp. Perhaps the letter opener itself, in haste. It tells me the murderer was here, handling the desk, but why?" In the library, Poirot studied the Hydra carving, his fingers tracing its serpentine heads. Sir Reginald chose this symbol. Murderer wishes us to chase shadows, but the shadows point back to them. Hastings, struggling to keep up, asked, "What's the trap, Poirot?" "You're planning something specific, aren't you?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Oui, Hastings. The trap is psychological. By announcing a revelation, I force the murderer to act, to protect their secret or to plant another distraction. We shall watch their movements, their glances, their mistakes. Throughout the day, Poirot subtly provoked the guests, dropping hints during casual conversations. To Lady Evelyn, he mentioned the sedative vial, noting its proximity to her room. To Clara, he alluded to the blue ink, asking if she had written any other letters that day. To Leonard, he remarked on the torn fabric, suggesting it placed him near the crime scene. To Dr. Haverford, he inquired about the voices in the library, pressing for details. To Mrs. Langston, he hinted at her debts, and to Miss Vane, he praised her courage but asked why she still withheld part of the truth. Each interaction was calculated, designed to unsettle. By late afternoon, the guests were visibly on edge. Hastings, shadowing Poirot, noticed small tells. Lady Evelyn's frequent glances at the clock, Clara's clenched fists when Leonard spoke, Dr. Haverford's nervous pacing. Even Mrs. Langston, usually so theatrical, seemed subdued, her notebook closed. Miss Vane, however, was the most affected, retreating to her room after lunch, claiming a headache. At 6 o'clock, a new discovery heightened the tension. Grayson, the butler, reported finding a small key in the garden near the rose bush where the torn fabric was found. It was ornate, matching the lock on a private desk in Sir Reginald's study, a desk no one had mentioned. Poirot examined it, his eyes gleaming. "This key," he said to Hastings and Japp, "it unlocks more than a desk. It unlocks a motive. Sir Reginald kept something hidden. Something worth killing for." Poirot insisted on opening the desk immediately. Inside, they found a bundle of letters, tied with a ribbon, addressed to Sir Reginald from an unknown correspondent. The letters, written in a flowing script, hinted at a scandal, a past affair, financial misconduct, or perhaps blackmail. One, dated a week prior, read, "You cannot hide forever. The Hydra will consume you unless you act." Poirot's expression was triumphant. "Voilà, Hastings, the Hydra again. These letters, they are the root of the crime." As 8 o'clock approached, the guests gathered in the drawing room, the atmosphere thick with dread. Poirot stood before them, his posture erect, his voice steady. "Mesdames et messieurs," at 9:30, argued with him, and left a trace that cannot be erased. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. "I speak of the letters in the locked desk. Letters that reveal a secret Sir Reginald wished to bury. Who wrote them? Who feared their exposure?" The question hung in the air, and Hastings saw the guests react. Lady Evelyn's sharp intake of breath, Clara's rigid stillness, Leonard's clenched fists, Dr. Haverford's trembling hands, Mrs. Langston's wide eyes, and Miss Vane's sudden pallor. Before anyone could respond, Miss Vane stood, her voice breaking. I wrote one of those letters," she whispered. "Not all, but one. It was about something I saw. Something wrong. I begged Sir Reginald to make it right, but he refused." She collapsed into her chair, sobbing, as the room erupted in gasps. Poirot raised a hand for silence. "Mademoiselle Vane, your courage is noted, but you are not the murderer. The trap, it has begun to close. The true killer, they are here, and they are nervous. Tomorrow, we shall know all." He dismissed the guests, who dispersed in stunned silence. In private, Hastings pressed Poirot. Was that the trap? Miss Vane's confession? Poirot shook his head. No, Hastings. Her confession is a step, but the trap is still set. The murderer watched tonight, and they will act before dawn. We must be vigilant. Lernaean Hall, its shadows alive with secrets, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Poirot's next move. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The evening of the 5th day at Lernaean Hall descended with a palpable sense of inevitability, the air thick with anticipation and dread. The guests, summoned to the drawing room at precisely 8 o'clock, sat in a tense semicircle, their faces pale under the chandelier's flickering light. Captain Hastings, stationed near the fireplace with his notebook, felt his heart pound as he sensed the climax of Hercule Poirot's investigation. The murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne, with its locked room, cryptic note, blue-stained handkerchief, and hidden letters, had woven a web of deception that Poirot was now poised to unravel. The Belgian detective stood at the center of the room, his diminutive figure commanding, his green eyes blazing with the fire of revelation. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant. Tonight, the Hydra of Lernaean Hall loses its final crime itself. Sir Reginald was found at 10:17 p.m., stabbed with a letter opener in his locked study. The window was secure, the door unforced, suggesting an impossible crime. But it was not impossible, merely clever. The note in his hand, "The Hydra grows, beware," was torn from a larger message, a warning or a threat. The blue ink on the pen, the handkerchief, the sedative vial, the hidden letter opener, the key to the locked desk. These are not random, but pieces of a deliberate design. He turned to the timeline, his voice steady. Let us reconstruct the evening. At 9 p.m. the house was locked, as confirmed by Grayson. At 9:15 Lady Evelyn visited Sir Reginald to discuss household matters, leaving by 9:20. At 9:30 Miss Vane overheard Sir Reginald arguing in his study with a woman, speaking of cutting off the Hydra. By 9:40 Leonard Bryce was seen near the fountain, and at 9:50 Clara saw Lady Evelyn in the hall, contradicting her alibi. At 10 o'clock Sir Reginald was writing a letter about his will. At 10:17, Lady Evelyn's scream alerted the house. The murderer. They moved within this window. Poirot paused, his gaze sweeping the room. The motives, they are many. Lady Evelyn, you faced financial ruin, and Sir Reginald's will threatened your security. Clara, you opposed your father's plans to sell the estate, fearing loss of your inheritance. Leonard, you were humiliated by Sir Reginald's threats to ruin you. Dr. Haverford, your medical negligence and access to sedatives raised questions. Mrs. Langston, your debts and literary feud with Sir Reginald gave you cause. Major Whitlock, your failed venture fueled resentment. And Miss Vane, your letters hinted at a scandal you wished to expose. The guest shifted uncomfortably, but Poirot continued. The red herrings, the second letter opener, the sedative vial, the torn fabric, were meant to mislead. But the blue ink, it is the key. The pen in Sir Reginald's study bore a smear of blue ink, not black. And the handkerchief, found among Clara's linens, carried the same. Clara admitted to using the pen that morning, but someone else used it that night, in the study, to write the note. Poirot's eyes settled on Lady Evelyn. Madame, you claim to have left the study by 9:20. But Clara saw you in the hall at 9:50, near the staircase. You lied about your movements. Why? Lady Evelyn's face paled, her hands trembling. I was upset. I went back to speak to Reginald. The room gasped, but Poirot pressed on. The locked room. It was no mystery. You entered through the door, stabbed Sir Reginald as he wrote, and left, locking the door behind you with his key, which you later hid in the garden. The sedative vial, it was yours, taken from Dr. Haverford's bag to suggest a drugging. But Sir Reginald was not drugged. His death was swift. The handkerchief you planted among Clara's linens to shift blame. Knowing her argument with her father made her a likely suspect. Lady Evelyn rose, her voice shrill. This is outrageous! I loved Reginald. I would never— Poirot cut her off, his voice like steel. You loved his wealth, madame, but not his control. The letters in the locked desk, they revealed your past. An affair, perhaps, or financial deceit that Sir Reginald threatened to expose. You killed him to silence him. Clara, tears streaming, cried, Evelyn, how could you? Leonard lunged forward, restrained by Japp's men. Mrs. Langston's pen stilled, her eyes wide with shock. Dr. Haverford and Major Whitlock exchanged stunned glances, while Miss Vane sobbed quietly, her confession having paved the way for the truth. Poirot raised a hand for silence. The Hydra, it was Sir Reginald's metaphor for his enemies. Secrets that multiplied. You, madame, were the head he sought to cut off, but you struck first. The scratch on the desk, the blue ink, the key in the garden, they all point to you. Lady Evelyn collapsed into her chair, her face ashen. I didn't mean to, she whispered. He was going to ruin me, take everything. I only wanted to talk, but he laughed, said I was nothing without him. Her voice broke, a confession spilling forth. Japp stepped forward, handcuffs ready as the room erupted in murmurs. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice soft. The little grey cells, they do not fail, mon ami. The truth, it is always there, in the details. As Lady Evelyn was led away, the guests dispersed, stunned by the revelation. Lernaean Hall, its secrets laid bare, seemed to exhale. The Hydra's heads severed at last. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The morning after Lady Evelyn Ashbourne's confession cast a somber light over Lernaean Hall, its grand rooms now quiet, as if the estate itself mourned the unraveling of its secrets. The mist that had clung to the Devonshire hills for days had lifted, revealing a sky of pale blue. But the clarity outside only underscored the emotional turmoil within. Captain Hastings, seated in the drawing room with a cup of tea gone cold, felt a mix of depth that Hastings recognized as the aftermath of a case well closed. Mon ami, Poirot said, turning to Hastings with a faint smile. The affair of Lernaean Hall, it is complete. The truth, it is a bitter medicine, but it heals, does it not? Hastings nodded, his notebook closed for the first time in days. You were brilliant, Poirot. The blue ink, the handkerchief, the key, every detail led to Lady Evelyn. But I confess I didn't see it until the end. How did you know? Poirot's smile widened, though it carried a touch of sadness. The little grey cells, Hastings, they see what the heart obscures. Let us reflect, for in reflection we understand. The guests, no longer confined by Inspector Japp's orders, had gathered one last time in the drawing room, their faces a mix of shock, guilt, and relief. Clara Ashbourne, her eyes red from weeping, sat by the fireplace, clutching a photograph of her father. Leonard Bryce, his usual sullenness softened, stood beside her, offering quiet comfort. Dr. Malcolm Haverford, his nervous tics subdued, murmured apologies for his evasions, while Major Ernest Whitlock, his bluster gone, stared into his coffee. Mrs. Beatrice Langston, her notebook abandoned, seemed subdued, her flair for drama quenched by the reality of the crime. Miss Penelope Vane, whose confession had sparked the final unraveling, sat quietly, her hands folded, her expression one of quiet resolve. Poirot addressed them, his voice gentle but firm. Mesdames et messieurs, the tragedy of Sir Reginald Ashbourne was born of secrets, of fears that grew like the Hydra's heads. Lady Evelyn, she sought to protect her future, but in doing so she destroyed it. The lesson, it is clear. The truth, it cannot be buried forever. He turned to Clara, his tone softening. Mademoiselle, your father, he loved you, but his choices, they created enemies. The will, the sale of the estate, the letters in the locked desk. These were his attempts to control the Hydra, but it consumed him. Clara nodded, tears falling. I should have listened to him, she whispered. I was so angry, but I loved him. To Leonard, Poirot said, Monsieur, your passion for Mademoiselle Clara, it blinded you, but it did not make you a murderer. Be wiser in your devotion. Leonard, his face flushed, nodded silently, his hand resting on Clara's shoulder. To the others, Poirot offered a broader reflection. Each of you carried a secret, debts, resentments, fears. These are the heads of the Hydra, multiplying in silence. But the truth, it is a blade that cuts cleanly. Learn from possible in every mystery. As the guests began to disperse, packing their bags to leave Lernaean Hall, Hastings joined Poirot for a final walk through the gardens. The fountain, where the sedative vial and key had been found, sparkled in the sunlight, its waters a stark contrast to the dark deeds it had witnessed. What now, Poirot? Hastings asked. Back to London, to the next case? Poirot paused, his gaze distant. We, Hastings, but first we reflect. The human heart, it is complex, full of contradictions. Lady Evelyn, she was not evil, only desperate. Her crime, it was born of fear, fear of loss, of exposure. We must understand this to prevent the next Hydra from growing. Hastings, moved by Poirot's words, nodded. You always see the bigger picture, don't you? Not just the crime, but why it happened. Poirot's smile was wistful. The why, mon ami, it is the heart of every case. Without it, we are merely chasing shadows. As they returned to the house, Poirot lingered by the Hydra carving in the library, its serpentine heads now a silent reminder of the solved mystery. Sir Reginald chose this symbol well, he said. He knew his secrets were dangerous, but he underestimated their power. We, too, must be vigilant, for the Hydra is never truly slain. The servants, led by Grayson, prepared the house for closure, the estate's future uncertain with Clara as its heir. Poirot and Hastings packed their bags, their departure set for the afternoon train. As they stood in the grand hall, Hastings felt a pang of sadness for the fractured lives left behind. Will they recover, Poirot? He asked. Clara, Leonard, the others. Poirot's expression was thoughtful. Time, Hastings, it heals, but it also teaches. They will carry this wound, but they will learn to live with it. And we move on, for there are always more mysteries, more hydras to face. With a final glance at Lernaean Hall, its ivy-clad walls now bathed in sunlight, Poirot stepped into the waiting car, his suitcase in hand. Hastings followed, his heart lighter but his mind still turning over the case. The Belgian detective, ever methodical, ever proud, had once again brought order to chaos, his little gray cells triumphant. As the car rolled down the gravel drive, the Hydra's shadow faded, but its lesson lingered. Secrets, like heads, multiply in darkness, and only the light of truth can sever them. Chapter 12. The Echoes of Truth. The sixth day at Lernaean Hall unfolded with night. The unmasking of Lady Evelyn as Sir Reginald's murderer had been a triumph of logic, yet it left a bittersweet aftertaste. The human cost of the crime weighing heavily on all who remained. Hercule Poirot, ever impeccable in his pressed suit and polished shoes, joined Hastings at the table, his green eyes reflective but alert. "Mon ami," he said, his voice low and measured. "The case is closed, yet the echoes of truth linger. We have severed the Hydra's heads, but the roots, they remain in the hearts of those who live on. We must ensure the truth settles, lest new secrets arise." Hastings, his notebook now a chronicle of the case, nodded thoughtfully. "It's over, Poirot, but it doesn't feel finished. Clara, Leonard, the others, they're shattered. And Miss Vane's confession, it was so pivotal. How did you know she'd break the case open?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "The little gray cells, Hastings. They see the cracks in the facade. Miss Vane, she was the observer, the silent witness. Her fear held her back, but her conscience, it demanded she speak. The guests, no longer suspects but still bound by the shared trauma, gathered for a subdued breakfast. Clara Ashburn, her face pale but composed, sat with Leonard Bryce, whose protective presence seemed to anchor her. Dr. Malcolm Haverford, his nervous tics subdued, spoke quietly of his plans to return to his practice, while Major Ernest Whitlock, his joviality absent, stared out the window, lost in thought. Mrs. Beatrice Langston, her flair for drama muted, sipped her coffee in silence, her notebook untouched. Miss Penelope Vane, whose courage had tipped the scales, sat at the table's edge, her eyes downcast but her posture less hunched, as if unburdened by her confession. Poirot, observing the group, addressed them with a gentle authority. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, "the truth has been revealed, and Lady Evelyn faces justice. But the truth, it is not only for the courts, it is for you. To heal and to learn. Sir Reginald's death was a tragedy born of secrets, of fears unspoken. Let his loss teach you to live openly, to sever the hydras in your own lives." Clara, her voice soft but steady, spoke first. "Monsieur Poirot, I can't thank you enough. You've given me closure, even if it hurts. Father's secrets, Evelyn's betrayal. I need to understand them, to move forward." Poirot inclined his head. "Mademoiselle," the spark that lit the truth. "You saw, you spoke, and you changed the course of this investigation. Be proud." Miss Vane's eyes filled with tears, but she managed a nod, her voice barely audible. "I only wanted to do right by Sir Reginald. Inspector Japp, preparing to depart for Exeter with his final report, approached Poirot with a gruff nod. "You've outdone yourself, Poirot. That locked room had me stumped, but you saw through it like glass. The chief constable will hear about this." Poirot waved a hand dismissively. "The credit, Inspector, belongs to the truth. I merely arranged the pieces." As the morning progressed, Poirot and Hastings took a final walk through Lernaean Hall, pausing in the library where the Hydra carving loomed above the fireplace. Poirot traced its serpentine heads, his expression thoughtful. "This symbol," he said. "It was Sir Reginald's warning to himself, a reminder of the dangers he faced. He knew of Lady Evelyn's secrets, of the letters in the locked desk. He sought to confront them, but he underestimated her desperation." Hastings, reflecting on the case, asked, "Do you ever feel the weight of it, Poirot? The pain you uncover, the lives you disrupt?" Poirot's gaze softened. "Oui, Hastings, but the weight of truth is lighter than the weight of lies. To leave a crime unsolved, to let the Hydra grow, that is the greater sin. We bring order, mon ami, even when it pains." The servants, led by Grayson, began preparations to close the house, as Clara planned to sell parts of the estate to settle its debts. She confided to Hastings that she intended to keep the West Wing as a family home, a place to rebuild with Leonard's support. "Father would want me to move forward," she said, her voice steady despite her grief. As noon approached, Poirot and Hastings gathered their belongings, their departure imminent. The other guests, too, prepared to leave, their bags packed, their farewells subdued. Mrs. Langston, breaking her silence, approached Poirot with a rare sincerity. "Monsieur Poirot, I've written many mysteries, but yours is the real art. I'll dedicate my next book to you." Poirot bowed slightly. "Madame, dedicated to the truth. That is reward enough." In the grand hall, as they awaited their car, Hastings looked back at Lernaean Hall, its ivy-clad walls now bathed in sunlight. "It's strange, Poirot," he said. "This place feels different now, like it's been cleansed." Poirot nodded, his eyes distant. "The truth. It purifies, Hastings. But the scars, they remain. We move on, but we do not forget." The car arrived and Poirot stepped inside with his usual precision, his suitcase neatly packed. Hastings, "Oui, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice warm. "To London, and to the next mystery. For the Hydra, it is never truly gone, only waiting for the next battle." Lernaean Hall faded into the distance, its secrets laid bare, its lessons etched in the hearts of those who had faced the truth. Chapter 13. The Lingering Shadows. The seventh day at Lernaean Hall dawned with a deceptive calm. The estate's rolling lawns bathed in a soft golden light that belied the turmoil of the past week. The resolution of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder, with Lady Evelyn's confession and arrest, had brought closure. Yet an undercurrent of unease persisted among those who remained. Captain Hastings, seated in the drawing room with a fresh pot of tea, found his thoughts drifting not to the triumph of Hercule Poirot's solution, but to the fractured lives left in its wake. The Hydra's heads had been severed, but its shadows lingered, whispering of secrets not fully dispelled. Hercule Poirot, impeccable as ever in a neatly pressed suit, joined Hastings, his green eyes thoughtful as he surveyed the room. "Mon ami," he said, his voice low and measured. "The case is closed, but the heart, it does not close so easily. We have uncovered the truth, but the echoes of this crime, they resonate still. We must ensure no new heads grow in the silence." Hastings, his notebook now a testament to Poirot's brilliance, set it aside and sighed. "You're right, Poirot. Lady Evelyn's guilt was clear, But I can't help feeling there's more to this story. Clara, Leonard, Miss Vane, they're all so shaken. And those letters in the locked desk, were they all about Lady Evelyn's past? Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing on his lips. The little gray cells, Hastings, they do not rest. The letters, they were the spark. But the fire, it burned through many lives. Let us reflect, and perhaps we shall see the final threads. The guests, now free to leave but lingering for their own reasons, gathered for a final breakfast in the dining room. Clara Ashbourne, her grief tempered by resolve, spoke quietly with Leonard Bryce, whose protective demeanor had softened into genuine affection. Dr. Malcolm Haverford, his professional confidence slowly returning, discussed plans to resume his practice, though his eyes betrayed lingering guilt over his evasions. Major Ernest Whitlock, his usual bluster absent, sat alone, staring into his coffee as if searching for answers. Mrs. Beatrice Langston, her flair for drama subdued, spoke little, her gaze distant. Miss Penelope Vane, whose confession had been the catalyst for Poirot's trap, sat with a quiet dignity, her earlier fear replaced by a sense of purpose. Poirot addressed the group, his tone gentle but authoritative. Mesdames et Miss, the Hydra. It was his metaphor for those secrets, but it was also his warning to you all. Live with truth, or the Hydra will return. Clara, her voice steady, spoke up. Monsieur Poirot, you've given me a chance to honor my father's memory. I'll sell parts of the estate as he planned, but I'll keep the heart of Lernaean Hall for my family. My real family. She glanced at Leonard, who nodded, his hand brushing hers. Poirot inclined his head. A wise choice, mademoiselle. The estate, it is yours to shape. Miss Vane, emboldened by her role in the case, added, I was afraid to speak, but you showed me that silence only feeds the Hydra. I'll return to my work, but I'll never forget this. Poirot's smile was warm. Courage, mademoiselle, is a rare gift. You have it in abundance. As the meal ended, Poirot requested a private moment with Clara in the library, where the Hydra carving loomed above the fireplace. Hastings accompanied them, curious about Poirot's lingering interest. Mademoiselle, Poirot said, his voice soft, the letters in your father's desk, they spoke of a scandal, but not all were about Lady Evelyn. One, I believe, concerned another in this house. Have you read them? Clara hesitated, then nodded. There was one, about Dr. Haverford. Father suspected he'd been negligent with a patient years ago, a case that cost a life. He was going to confront him. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And this, it explains the doctor's nervousness. But it was not his motive for murder, only for silence. The Hydra, it touched many lives. Clara nodded, her expression resolute. I'll destroy that letter. Dr. Haverford's made mistakes, but he's no killer. I want to start anew. Outside, as Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart, Inspector Japp approached, his report complete. The chief constable's singing your praises, Poirot, he said with a grin. Lady Evelyn's confessed fully, says she acted alone, driven by fear of losing everything. Case closed. Poirot nodded, but his expression was thoughtful. Closed, oui. But the human heart, it is never so simple. The truth, it leaves scars. As they walked through the gardens, pausing by the fountain where the key and vial had been found, Hastings pressed Poirot. Is it truly over, Poirot? No loose ends? Poirot's gaze was distant. There are always loose ends, Hastings, but they are not always crimes. The letters, the secrets, they were the Hydra's roots. Lady Evelyn struck the fatal blow, but others fed the beast with their logic. Poirot bowed. Right of truth, madame, and you will honor us all. In the grand hall, as their car arrived, Hastings looked back at Lernaean Hall, its ivy-clad walls now serene in the sunlight. It's a beautiful place, Poirot, but I'll be glad to leave it behind. Poirot nodded, his eyes tracing the Hydra carving one last time. Beauty, Hastings, can hide darkness, but the truth, it brings light. We leave Lernaean Hall, but its lessons, they travel with us. As the car rolled down the gravel drive, Poirot leaned back, his hands folded neatly. To London, mon ami, and to new challenges. The Hydra, it is vanquished here, but elsewhere it waits. Hastings smiled, comforted by Poirot's certainty. Lernaean Hall faded into the distance, its secrets exposed, its shadows softened by the clarity of truth. Chapter 14. The Final Threads. The 8th day at Lernaean Hall unfolded under a sky of unblemished blue. The estate's sprawling lawns and ivy-clad walls bathed in a serene light that seemed to mock the turmoil of the past week. The resolution of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder, with Lady Evelyn's confession and the unmasking of her desperate motives, had brought a semblance of peace. Yet a quiet unease lingered, as if the Hydra's shadow still clung to the corners of the house. Captain Hastings, seated in the drawing-room with the final cup of tea, felt a mix of relief and introspection. Hercule Poirot's triumph had been absolute, yet the human cost of the truth weighed heavily, and Hastings wondered if all the threads of the mystery had truly been tied. Poirot, impeccable in his charcoal suit, his mustache a perfect curve, joined Hastings, his green eyes reflecting a quiet satisfaction tempered by contemplation. "Mon ami," he said, his voice soft but resonant, "the case of Lernaean Hall is closed, but the heart, it lingers on the edges of truth. We have severed the Hydra's heads, but we must ensure no new ones sprout. Today we tie the final threads." Hastings, setting aside his notebook, which now read like a chronicle of Poirot's genius, nodded thoughtfully. "You've done it again, Poirot. Lady Evelyn's confession, the blue ink, the hidden key, it all fell into place. But I can't shake the feeling that there's something more, some detail we've overlooked. Those letters in the desk, were they all about her?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The little gray cells, Hastings. They do not rest until every question is answered. Let us walk through the final moments to ensure the picture is complete." The remaining guests, now preparing to depart, gathered for a final, subdued gathering in the dining room. Clara Ashbourne, her grief softened by a newfound resolve, sat beside Leonard Bryce, whose devotion had grown steadier in the wake. Ernest Whitlock, his usual bravado absent, sat quietly, his thoughts elsewhere. Mrs. Beatrice Langston, her flair for drama muted, offered a rare moment of sincerity, thanking Poirot for his clarity. Miss Penelope Vane, whose confession had been the catalyst for the truth, sat with a quiet strength, her role in the case a source of unexpected pride. Poirot addressed them, his tone measured but warm. "Mesdames et messieurs, the Hydra of Lernaean Hall has been vanquished, its secrets laid bare by the light of truth. Sir Reginald's death was a tragedy of human failing, greed, fear, betrayal, but it is also a lesson. The Hydra grows only in silence. Speak your truths and it cannot take root." Clara, her voice steady, spoke first. "Monsieur Poirot, you have given me a chance to rebuild. I'll keep the heart of Lernaean Hall, but I'll make it a place of honesty, not secrets." Leonard, his hand resting on hers, added, "We'll do it together. Sir Reginald misjudged me, but I'll prove him wrong by supporting Clara." Poirot nodded approvingly. "A noble goal, monsieur. Let truth guide you." Miss Vane, her eyes clear, spoke softly. I was afraid to speak, but you showed me the power of truth, Monsieur Poirot. I'll carry that with me, always. Poirot's smile was gentle. Courage, mademoiselle, is the greatest weapon against the Hydra. You wield it well. As the guests dispersed to pack, Poirot requested a final walk through the library with Hastings and Clara, where the Hydra carving loomed above the fireplace. He paused by the locked desk, now empty of its incriminating letters. Mademoiselle, he said to Clara, you mentioned a letter about Dr. Haverford's past. You chose to destroy it, a gesture of mercy. But was there more in those letters, something you withheld? Clara hesitated, then nodded. One letter. It wasn't about Evelyn or Haverford. It was from Father, unsent, addressed to me. He apologized for his distance, for letting the estate's burdens come between us. He said he wanted to protect me, even if it meant hard choices. Poirot's eyes softened. And this, it confirms his love for you. The Hydra, it was not just his enemies but his own regrets. You have done well to honor him. Clara's eyes glistened, but she stood taller, her resolve firm. Outside, Inspector Japp joined them, his report finalized. Lady Evelyn's in custody, singing like a canary, he said with a grin. She's admitted Evelyn acted alone, driven by fear of exposure. The letters, the ink, the locked room, they all pointed to her. But the human heart, it is never fully known. We have done our duty, but we leave behind lives that must heal. The servants, under Grayson's direction, continued closing the house, as Clara prepared to oversee its partial sale. She confided to Hastings her plans to create a scholarship in her father's name, a legacy of good from the ashes of tragedy. It's what he would have wanted, she said, her voice steady. As Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart, Mrs. Langston approached, her usual theatrics replaced by sincerity. Monsieur Poirot, you've shown me that truth is more gripping than fiction. My next novel will reflect that. Poirot bowed. Write with clarity, madame, and you will surpass your own expectations. In the grand hall, as their car waited, Hastings looked back at Lernaean Hall, its walls now serene in the sunlight. It's a strange feeling, Poirot, he said. We've solved the crime, but the place still feels haunted. Poirot nodded, his eyes tracing the Hydra carving one last time. Haunted, oui, but by lessons, not ghosts. The truth, it sets free, but it also leaves echoes. We carry them with us. As they drove away, the estate fading into the distance, Poirot leaned back, his hands folded neatly. To London, Hastings, and to new horizons. The Hydra is slain here, but its kin await elsewhere. Hastings smiled, comforted by Poirot's unwavering certainty. Lernaean Hall, its secrets bared, stood as a testament to the power of truth, its final threads woven into a tapestry of justice. Chapter 15. The Departure. The ninth and final day at Lernaean Hall broke with a crystalline clarity. The Devonshire sky a vivid blue that seemed to wash away the last vestiges of the estate's dark secrets. The resolution of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder, with Lady Evelyn's confession, and the unmasking of her desperate act, had restored order. Yet the house retained an air of solemnity, as if mourning the lives it had shaped and broken. Captain Hastings, standing in the grand hall with his suitcase packed, felt a complex blend of relief, satisfaction, and lingering melancholy. Hercule Poirot's triumph had been a masterstroke of logic, severing the Hydra's heads, but the scars of truth remained etched in the hearts of those who lingered. Poirot, immaculate in his tailored suit, his mustache a perfect crescent, joined Hastings, his green eyes bright with the quiet. Extraordinary, Poirot. The way you pieced together the blue ink, the hidden key, Miss Vane's confession. It was like watching a puzzle come alive. But I can't help wondering, will Clara and the others ever truly recover? Poirot's smile was wistful. Recovery, Hastings, is a journey, not a destination. The truth, it frees, but it also wounds. They will carry this, but they will also grow, the remaining guests. Preparing for their own departures, gathered one last time in the drawing room. Their faces a mix of resolve and fragility. Clara Ashburn, her grief now tempered by purpose, stood beside Leonard Bryce, whose steady presence promised a future built on trust. Dr. Malcolm Haverford, his professional confidence slowly returning, spoke of plans to atone for his past mistakes through his work. Major Ernest Whitlock, his usual bluster replaced by quiet introspection, offered a rare nod of respect to Poirot. Mrs. Beatrice Langston, her theatricality subdued, clutched a new manuscript inspired by the case, her eyes bright with creative fire. Miss Penelope Vane, whose courage had been the key to unlocking the truth, stood with a newfound strength, her role in the investigation a source of quiet pride. Poirot addressed them, his tone a blend of authority and compassion. Mesdames et messieurs, the Hydra of Lernaean Hall has been vanquished, its secrets laid bare by the light of truth. Sir Reginald's death was a tragedy of human weakness, greed, fear, betrayal. But it is also a lesson. Live with honesty, for the Hydra thrives in silence. You leave this place not as you came, but stronger, wiser, and free. Clara, her voice clear and resolute, spoke first. Monsieur Poirot, you've given me more than justice. You've given me a path forward. I'll rebuild Lernaean Hall, not as a monument to the past, but as a home for the future. Leonard, his hand gently on her arm, added, We'll do it together, and we'll do it right. Poirot nodded, his eyes warm. Mademoiselle, Monsieur, you have the strength to shape a new legacy. Honor it with truth. Miss Vane, her voice steady, said, I was afraid to speak, but you showed me that truth is worth the risk. I'll carry that lesson always. Poirot's smile was gentle. Courage, mademoiselle, is the spark that lights the truth. You have kindled a flame that will not fade. As the guests dispersed to their final preparations, Poirot and Hastings took a last walk through the estate, pausing in the library, where the Hydra carving stood as a silent witness. Poirot traced its serpentine heads, his expression contemplative. Tiers, no. But I feel the weight, Hastings. The little gray cells, they solve the puzzle, but the heart, it understands the cost. We bring order, but we also bring healing. Outside, Inspector Japp joined them, his report filed and his mood lighter. The chief constable's calling you a miracle worker, Poirot, he said with a grin. Lady Evelyn's confession is airtight. She's admitted everything, from the letters to the planted handkerchief. You've done it again. Poirot waved a hand modestly. The truth, Inspector, it does the work. I merely point the way. Grayson, the butler, oversaw the final closing of the house as Clara prepared to depart for London to oversee the estate's partial sale. She confided to Hastings her plan to establish a charitable trust in her father's name, a legacy of good from the ashes of tragedy. "It's what he would have wanted," she said, her eyes bright with determination. As Poirot and Hastings boarded their car, Mrs. Langston approached, her manuscript in hand. "Monsieur Poirot, this story will be my best, thanks to you. It's called The Hydra's Shadow. Fitting, don't you think?" Poirot bowed. "Write with truth, madame, and it will be a masterpiece." In the grand hall, as the car waited, Hastings took a final look at Lernaean Hall, its walls now aglow in the sunlight. "It's beautiful, Poirot, but I'm glad to leave it behind. Too many ghosts." Poirot nodded, his eyes tracing the distant Hydra carving. "Ghosts, Hastings, are but echoes of the past. We have given them peace. Now, to London, and to new battles." As the car rolled down the gravel drive, Poirot leaned back, his hands folded neatly, his expression serene. "The Hydra is slain, mon ami, but its kin are everywhere. We go where the truth calls." Hastings smiled, comforted by Poirot's unwavering resolve. Lernaean Hall faded into the distance, its secrets laid bare, its lessons a beacon for those who would heed them.